Hey everyone, it's Anthony from Pretty Printed here. In today's video, I'm going to show you actually a few videos on how to use Flask-Mail. So these are from my course called the Flask Extensions course on my website. So it's a series of about 9 or 10 videos that are edited together, so it's all one, but it just covers different parts of Flask-Mail. So I hope you enjoy this video. I hope it helps you use Flask-Mail. And if you have any questions about Flask-Mail after watching this video, just leave a comment down below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Installing Flask-Mail is pretty easy. You just type pip install flask-mail, and it will go ahead and install it for you. It should be pretty quick because it's a small extension. Now that it's installed, let me talk about the configuration. So first, let me set up the basics of a Flask app. So import Flask, and then from Flask_mail, import mail with a capital M. And then I'll instantiate the Flask app. And now for the configuration. So there are a few configuration values in Flask-Mail, and I'll cover them all here and explain what they mean. And then you should know how to use them in your app. So the configuration values are mail server. And let me just go ahead and copy this a few times because there are several configuration values. So mail server, and I'll explain these after I type them. Mail port, mail use TLS, mail use SSL, mail debug, mail username, and some of these should be self-explanatory, but I'll explain them anyway. So mail password is the next one. Mail default sender, and then I need a few more, I think 3 more. Mail max emails, mail suppress send, and finally mail ASCII attachments. Okay, so the first configuration value is the location of your mail server. So an example would be mail.prettyprinted.com. It can be something like mail.gmail.com, something where you have the address of your server. So if you've ever set up your email on a phone, then you're probably familiar with the server for your email. If you're not, then it's pretty easy to find. It's just basically looking at the documentation for your email provider. So if you're using Gmail, you use one server. If you're using Yahoo, you use a different server. If you have your own domain, you use a different server. And I'll show you how to do it with my email, but of course your email is going to be different. Port is the port that the email is sent through on your server. So normally this would be something like 25 or 465. It just depends on your email provider. It could technically be anything, but it's most likely going to be either 25 or 465. So check your documentation for that. And like I said, I'll show you how to use this with my mail client, and then you'll have to adapt it to yours. Mail use TLS, and the default is false. So let me put the default values here just so you can see what they are. So I believe the default for port is 25. The default for mail server is localhost, so it assumes you have the server on your computer. So use TLS is used for security purposes, for encryption purposes. So TLS and SSL do basically the same thing, but different email clients use different ones. Sometimes they use both. Sometimes they use one or the other. And if you don't have any kind of security on your email, you'll have neither one. So the default values are false. And with these, you have to play around with a little bit. So I would start with TLS, set that to true while keeping SSL to false. See if you can send emails that way. If you can't, then put TLS to false and then SSL to true. See if you can send emails. If you can't, then put them both to true. If you can't do it and any of those three cases, then you should check and make sure that your email is actually encrypted using SSL or TLS. If it isn't, then it's probably going to be on port 25 and it won't have either TLS or SSL. So you'll just have to check your email client again for that. Mail debug is given the same value as your overall debug in your app. So if you have a configuration for, let's see, AppConfig debug, and let's say it's true, then this will be the same value as that debug value. So in this case, it should be true. If you have debug set to false, it would be false. So let's just put true here. Mail username and mail password, those are self-explanatory. You're going to have a username and password to log into your email server. So whatever you have for the username and password, you just put those there. And the default values are none because you have to put in something. They can't guess the value for you. A default sender, the default is none. And default sender, what it does is it will add the sender that you specify here as the from on each one of your emails. So in my case, it would be something like Anthony at prettyprinted.com. So if I did Anthony at prettyprinted.com here, then every email that I send that I don't specify from, then it will automatically use Anthony at prettyprinted.com. When I actually show you how to send the email, you'll see that you can specify a sender. And if you do, then it will overwrite this default sender. But if you don't, then it will simply use the default sender. And like I said, the default value here is none because it can't guess what you want. Max emails will prevent one mail call from sending too many emails. So for instance, if you put 5 and then you had an email that was going to get sent to 10 people, then it would stop after the 5th email. This is for protection purposes because, I mean, if you've ever worked in an environment where you have an app that can send emails, surely one person has accidentally sent hundreds or even thousands of emails to someone. So this can kind of prevent that by accident. So when you're testing, you want to make sure you don't send too many emails. By default, this is none, but you can set this to any value that you like. Suppress send. This is similar to debug. So there's also the AppConfig testing, and this testing value will be the same as suppress send. So let's say testing is false, then suppress send will be false. And if testing is true, then suppress send will be true. And the reason why you want to do this is because oftentimes when you're testing your app, you don't want to continually send emails over and over again. I mean, it's something you only have to test a few times, and testing your overall app will happen more than you test your emails. So you don't want to send emails every single time. So if you put your app into testing mode, then it won't send emails at all. Like the code would be there would be no errors, but it won't actually send the emails. So keep that in mind if you're just testing your app and you don't actually need to see the emails. And one note on debug is that I forgot to mention is it will give you some debug information with emails if debug is true. So just keep that in mind, and I'll show you how that works later. And then finally, mail ASCII attachments. The default value is false, and this basically converts the file name that you specify when you attach something to an email, and it will convert it to ASCII. So if you have some non-ASCII characters, it will try to force them over to ASCII, and ASCII characters are basically the characters that you're used to in English. If you are used to typing English on your computer, then ASCII characters are probably the ones you're familiar with. Unicode characters have far more options. ASCII only has, I want to say, like 100 or so, whereas Unicode has thousands. So this will convert your file names to ASCII, so it will have that limited characters that you can send. So if your email server doesn't support Unicode, for instance, then you can just convert everything to ASCII and you can send attachments. So those are all the configuration values. So next I'll show you how they work on my server, and then I'll show you how to send an email, of course. Okay, so to set this up on my server, and of course, like I said, this is going to be different on your server, but I'll go through each one to set it up. So my mail server is something called HushMail. So it's smtp.hushmail.com. All right, so if you use something else, it can be smtp.gmail.com or mail.gmail.com or mail.yourdomain.com. I don't know what it is, but that's what mine is. The port for my email server is actually 587. So this could be 465, this can be 25, or it can be some other value. So you'll have to check that for your server. In my particular case, for TLS, it's going to be true, and for SSL, it's going to be false. And like I said, you want to try different combinations of these values to find out what works for you, because it varies from server to server. Mail debug, I'll remove this because it depends on the debug value, so I'll just comment that out. And then username, my username is Anthony at prettyprinted.com. The password, I won't put in the password here because I don't want you guys logging into my email server. The default sender, I'll set as Anthony at prettyprinted.com. Max emails, I'll leave as default along with suppress send, which is actually based off testing, so I can comment that out. And I'll leave ASCII attachments as false as well. So those are the values, and to test that it works, what I'll do is I'll send a very simple email to make sure everything works. So now that I have all the configuration values ready, what I can do is I can instantiate Flask-Mail. So mail equals mail, and you pass in the app. Also, another thing you can do, in case you don't want to do that, you can do mail equals the mail class, so you're instantiating it, and then you can type mail init app, and you pass in the app. So either one works. This one's one line, that's why I prefer it. But depending on the pattern that you use, you can use init app. So I'll comment that out and I'll leave it there. But if you want to use it, then you can go ahead and use it. So in Flask, everything needs to be done inside of a request. So I need to create a route to use emails. So I'll just create a route on the index. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a very simple message in this index. So when you go to the index, it's going to send an email, and I'll see what the message was. So I'll need to import the message class up here along with mail, and I'll create a new message. So I'll type message, so MSG. This is just by convention. This can be any value that you want, but MSG, and then message. And the values that it takes, the first value is the title of your message. So in this case, I'll say, hey there. And then you can specify the sender, but I won't because I have a default sender. But if you wanted to specify sender, it'd be something like sender and then my name at myemail.com. But since I have a default sender, it's going to use that when I don't specify a sender here. And then finally, what I need are the recipients. So recipients, and of course, you can send an email to multiple people. So in this case, I want to send it to one person. I'm going to create a temporary email. So let's see. Temporary email. And let's see. This is the first one that appears. Okay, so this is my disposable email. And I'll use that to send to. And now that I have the recipient there, the only thing that I need to do is just send the message. So it's mail.send, and you pass in a message. So this message happens to be MSG. If I had multiple messages, I'd have multiple variable names. And just remember that if you have a max emails, then when you call this send, it won't send more than the max. And then I'll make it to where I can actually run this app. So if name equals main, I'm going to run app run debug. I will already have debug set up there, so I'll save that. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll actually add my password so I can send. But you don't need to see the password, so I'll blur that out. And then I'll run the app. So Python app.py. And I'll simply go to the index. And it didn't return a response. So let's try message has been sent. And I'll try again. It tells me message has been sent. So now let me look at my temporary mail here and let's see if anything appears. And if I do get an email, then that means my email is set up correctly. And the reason why I have two emails here is because on the first one where it failed, it actually got through the code to send the email, but then it got to the end of the function and there was no return value, so it failed, but it still sent the email. And then the second time I did it, of course, it sent it. So here I have two messages. They're going to be the same. There should be nothing in them because I didn't have a body in the message. But this is something that you need to do to make sure that your server is set up correctly. And then once you can send one email, you should be able to send any number of emails. So of course, the next thing I'll show you how to do is how to add more to your emails, because sending messages with just a title and a recipient isn't very exciting. It's almost useless. So I'll show you how to do that next. So a quick note on debug mode and what it does is if you have your app in debug mode, it's going to output some debug information when you go to send your email. So if I go back to my index and send, and then look at the console, what I'll see is a bunch of debug information for this email being sent. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff, and if things don't work out, you can kind of use this information to debug what's going on. And you can see the message here. You can see that it's connecting to the server and doing other things. So if you have any problems, you can check this if you are in debug mode. Okay, so if you want to add a message in the body of the email, what you would do is you would specify it using message.body and then whatever you want your message to be. So let's say this is a test email sent from Anthony's, escape that, Anthony's app. You don't have to reply. So that's my body. And if I save that and refresh again, and then take a look, this is the one I sent for debug mode. So I'll just delete that. So I'll just wait for the next one. So this should be the new message and it should have the body. So I see this is a test email sent from Anthony's app and you don't have to reply. And of course, emails can have HTML in them. So instead of body, you can use HTML. So I'll change that to HTML and I'll just bold everything so you can see what happens. /B, save that, and I'll send. And once I get the message, I should see bold text in the message body. So, hey there. And now the message is bold because I put the bold tags around the text. So just keep that in mind. And if you want to use both the HTML and the body, here is the body. I'll save that and I'll send it. And let's see what happens when you use both. So it will take a moment. Hey there. And when you use both, you get the HTML. So just keep that in mind when you are creating your messages. You want to use either the body or the HTML. I'd recommend the body for simple messages, and if you want your messages to be a little more flashy, then use HTML. But as you can see, it's that easy to add stuff to the body of your email, which is really the most important part. Adding more recipients to your emails is very straightforward. So you can either add them to this list here. So as you can see, I have one value in the list, or I can use message.add_recipient. And what that will do is it will take the email that is passed in here and it will add it to the list of recipients. So I'll show you that. So I'll find another temporary email service. And let's say this one, Nada. I don't think I've ever used this one. So get me an inbox. And let's see, where's my email? So copy. And what I'll do is I'll add a recipient here. And I'll also add one more temporary email. So Gorilla Mail this time. And let's see, how do I copy this one? I don't like this service, so let me go to a different one. It's tempmailaddress.com. Okay, so I will add this to the list, save it, and I'll send the email again. And now I should get an email in the 3 emails. So the first one, I have hey there, which is what I want. Second one, I see a hey there. This is a test email. And finally, temp mail address. I'm waiting. And I see hey there. Okay, so wow, there's a lot of dating ads on this particular one. But I have the email in each one of the temporary emails. So I can't even pronounce these, but as you can see, it's pretty easy to add multiple recipients, and you can do it in 2 ways. You can add it to the list here, or you can add each recipient individually. Sometimes you want to have your name in the from part of the email. So in the from part, first let me remove the extra recipients because I won't be using them. But in the from part of the email, you can have a name. So if you want to have that, you simply use a tuple instead of just a string. So if you use a tuple, then the first value will be the name. So let's say Anthony from Pretty Printed. And the second value will be the actual from email. So I'll save that and I'll send another email so you can see what happens. And I forgot to start my server over. So app.py. So message sent. And let's see what happens. Refresh. Okay, so now you see Anthony from Pretty Printed and Anthony at prettyprinted.com. I think I got hit with the cookies from the other email service. So hey there, and then I see the same messages there. So if you had a explicit sender here, then you can do the same thing. You can add the tuple, or you can simply add the string. But like I said, I'm using the default sender, so I'm not going to add the sender here under message. Okay, so sometimes you would want to send more than one email at a time. So instead of sending emails to individuals, maybe you have a list of people that you want to send an email to, and you can use Flask-Mail to do that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a new route, and I'll call this bulk. And I'm not going to actually send the email because it's a little annoying setting the temporary email accounts. But what I will do is I'll show you all the code that's necessary, and then you can try to run it once you have your email set up. So really, the first thing that I need to do this is a list of users and their associated emails. So I'll just create a list of user dictionaries, and it's going to be fairly simple. It's going to have a name and an email in it. So I'll call the second key email, and let's just add a fake email address, email@email.com. And of course, if I had more users, then I'd have more dictionaries in here. But for our purposes, I'll just have the one. And then once I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Flask-Mail to first open up a connection, because this connection is going to be used to send all the emails. So I'll say with mail.connect as con, so CONN, and this con is going to be the connection. And as long as this con is open, so this with mail.connect is a block, as long as this con is open, so everything that is run inside this block, you'll be able to send emails. So inside of this block, what I'll do is I'll loop over the list of users I have. So in a real situation, this would probably be from a database, but like I said, this is just a sample, so it's just a single list with one user in it. But what I would do is I loop over the users like this. I do something like for user in users, and then I would then start creating the messages in a similar way that I'm doing up here in the index. So for the message, I'll create a message and I'll say bulk. And then the recipients will be the current user that is being iterated over. So user email. Of course, I can add the name in there somewhere, but I'm not going to do all that. And then for the body, I'll add something like, hey there. And then once I have those two things, so I have this message complete that I'm looking to send, I would just use the connection that I opened with mail.connect. So connection.send, and I'll pass in the message. And then what's going to happen is every time this loops over, it's going to use the same connection to send the message. And if I have 100 users that I want to send a message to, then it will send 100 emails. And this goes back to that configuration value. Where is it? Mail max emails. The connection will close and restart once you reach those max emails if you have that configured. And the reason is because for a lot of email clients, they don't allow their users to send multiple emails at once, because that's more of a mailing list service. So it just depends on your email provider. But that's one way you can get around it if you have limits from your email provider in terms of how many messages you can send in a short period of time. So if you have that, you can use the max emails configuration value, and you can change that to be something a little smaller if necessary, or you can turn it to none if you have a server set up to where that doesn't matter at all. It just depends on your situation. But as you can see here, sending bulk emails is pretty much as straightforward as sending one email. Really, the only two things that you do differently are you create the connection up front, and then you loop over the users, and then you finally send using the connection that you opened up with. So pretty straightforward stuff, and should be pretty easy to figure out once you run it with your own code or your own setup for your email provider. Okay, so sometimes in your app, you would want to send a lot of emails at once for whatever reason. This probably won't be initiated by a user's action. Instead, this will be kind of like a backend process that you want to use. But if you're using Flask-Mail for this, then the approach that you take will be a little different. So I'll create another route, and this will be for demonstration purposes because setting up a temporary email is a little annoying. So I'll show you the code, but you'll just have to believe me when I tell you that it will actually send on the emails. But I'll explain everything that's going on. So bulk here, and then let's call this bulk. So in this route, what I'm trying to do is I want to send an email to a bunch of different recipients. So let's say I have like a list of 1,000 recipients. So I'll have users here, and I'll have like a list of user objects, and each user object has an email. So let's say it has a name and an email. And I just have a bunch of these in a list. So let's say you're using SQL Alchemy and you query your database for a bunch of people who meet some criteria, and you have a list of 1,000 user objects, and each user object has an email. I can send an email to each one of those users. So now that I have the list, what I want to do is first I need to create the connection So instead of sending an individual message like this, I need to create the connection first. So I'll use with mail.connect and I'll name it con. So this is by convention from the Flask-Mail docs. So what this is doing is it's opening up a connection for you. And with the con, you're going to send the messages. And as long as this connection is open, you can send messages. So for user and users, what I want to do here is I want to get each user in my list, and I'll simply send a message for each one. So I'll say something like message equals bulk, and then sender's defaults, and I'll say recipients is going to be user.email, and I'll add a body. And then finally, I'll send it. But instead of using mail.send, I'll use con.send message. So what this is going to do is it's going to keep open the connection and send all the messages in the same connection. And this is where the max emails comes into play again. If you have max email set, then it will restart the connection once you get to that value. So if your max emails is say 10, then once it gets to max emails, it will reconnect to the server and start sending emails again, because some email servers don't allow you to send a bunch of messages at once because you're trying to use it as like a email list server, and that's not what they're for. You should only be sending one email at a time. This is how a lot of the mail servers think. So if that's the case, then you can use mail max emails to reconnect to the server and then send more emails. But this is how you would send bulk messages if you wanted to. I'm not going to do it here because it's fairly straightforward, but this is how you would send bulk messages. And the last thing I want to show you is how to add attachments to your messages. So adding an attachment is pretty straightforward. First thing you have to do is actually open up the file that you want to attach, and then you attach it using kind of the same method that you use to specify the body in or HTML. So I have a picture of a cat here in my project directory. So I'll say with app.open resource. So open resource is a way to open files in your Flask project. So cat.jpg, and I'll open this as cat. So now that the image is open, I can attach it. So message.attach. And first thing I need to do is specify a name. So cat.jpg. And then the MIME type. So in this case, image/JPEG. And then the actual contents of the file. So cat.read, since the file is open. And I can't get attachments to work with the temporary email service, so I'll just send it to my personal email. And let's send. And I'll bring my personal email over so you can see. So I got a hey there, and I see a picture of a cat has been attached. So fairly straightforward. Just know that any other file type that you want to open, you'll have to know the MIME type for it so it doesn't get corrupted when you send. So keep that in mind. If you're opening up like a PDF or a text file, you'll need to have the appropriate MIME type here as the second argument. But as you can see, attaching files is very, very straightforward. And what I want to talk about now is all the options that you can pass to your message. So as you saw already, there's the body, the HTML, recipients, and you can use these either as message dot the parameter name, or you can put them in the message here. It doesn't matter, either one works. So I'll just create an example of what you can send, but I won't actually send, I'll just explain, but they're pretty self-explanatory. So message equals message. So
One of the things you can have is the subject. So that's the first one, and that's why I didn't have to specify subject here. I could have wrote subject like this, but I didn't. But subject is one of the things that you can supply. Recipients, you're already familiar with. It's a list. And then the body, or HTML. And of course you have sender, which can default to what I have in the configuration. CC, so if you're familiar with CC in emails, then this is also just a list, and this will add CC values to all your messages. Likewise, BCC is similar, it's just for BCC. You can have attachments, so it's a list of attachments that you can have, but I recommend using the attach instead. Reply to specifies the email that they should reply to instead of the email that it's sent from. Date, you can pass in a date for, this will be a date object, by the way, a date that the email has been sent. Char set will give you the character set for the email, something like ASCII or UTF-8. Extra headers will be a dictionary of headers that you will want to send along with the email. So if you're familiar with headers, then you would just supply the header name and the header value in the emails. And then if you're familiar with mail options, so mail options will be a list of mail options from ESMTP. So if you're familiar with those, you can just add those in a list. Same with RCPT options. If you're familiar with those, you can just add those to the list. So those are all the parameters that you can have in message. And of course, you can use the dot notation here instead, but those are the ones that you will want to use. But basically subject, recipients, and body are really the only ones you need. Maybe CC, maybe reply to. It just depends on your particular case. But they're all pretty self-explanatory and very easy to use. Flask-Mail is a pretty simple extension, although very powerful. So I'm going to give you an example of how to set up Gmail with Flask-Mail. So I have a Gmail account here, and I have my Flask-Mail app here. So I'll configure the settings. So to do that, I'll go to Settings, and then I'll go to Forwarding and POP/IMAP. And what I'm looking for is Learn More on the left-hand side here. This is going to give me the information that I need. So I'm looking for outgoing, and this is the server. So smtp.gmail.com will be the server. So I'll paste that there. The port is either 465 or 587, depending on whether or not I use TLS. In this case, I will use TLS, so I'll use port 587. 587. Use TLS will be true. And this is a weird setting where you have TLS and SSL. I need to leave TLS as true, but SSL is false. So that's just a quirk in the configuration for the SMTP library, even though Gmail says that you need both SSL and TLS. So from there, I just need my information for my account. So prettyprintedmail@gmail.com. I'll pass in my password. If I can just copy it. And then the default sender will be the same as my username. And then I'll send it to my personal email address. And I'll start up my app. And as soon as I go to the index, it should send a message. So going to my index, it says message has been sent. And I'll look at my email to see if anything arrives in the inbox. So I'll just wait a moment, and if it arrives, it should say hey there, because that's what I sent in the email. So I'll refresh. There we go. So we see prettyprintedmail@gmail.com sent me an email with just the title hey there with nothing else, because that's the only thing that I sent. So if you have Gmail, you should now know how to set up
Gmail with FlaskMail, and you can send emails from your apps.